The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the construction equipment. It wasn't the sound of drilling or the smell of fresh concrete. It was the fence.
Keep it coming,
A tall,
steady flow.
freshly installed wooden fence stood where open land used to stretch.
Watch the edge,
cutting
bring it
across a
back
property
slightly.
that had always been quiet, untouched, and undeniably mine. 4 years, that vacant lot had been nothing more than an investment, a long-term plan waiting for the right time. It sat just a few blocks away from my home, tucked inside a neighborhood governed by an HOA that had always been more annoying than dangerous. Until now. The fence wasn't just new. It was deliberate. Clean lines. Professional installation. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Whoever built it believed they had every right to do so. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because no one had that right. The closer I got, the worse it became. Heavy machinery rested on the land. Fresh tire tracks carved through the soil. Stakes marked out lines for what looked like the early stages of construction. It wasn't random. It was organized. Planned. Authorized. But not by me. There had been no notification. No request. No paperwork. No warning. The HOA had rules about everything, from mailbox colors to grass height, but somehow a full-scale construction project had appeared on privately owned land without a single message reaching me. That wasn't a mistake. That was intent. The realization didn't come all at once. It built slowly, piece by piece, like the foundation being poured on my property. Someone had made a decision. Someone had signed something. Someone had allowed this to happen. And the most dangerous part was this: they thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse. They thought I wouldn't fight back. The lot had never been a secret. It had been purchased years earlier, during a time when property values were low and long-term investments still made sense. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't developed. But it was valuable in a way that only patience could reveal. The HOA had always viewed it differently. To them, it was an eyesore. An unused patch of land that didn't contribute to their carefully controlled image of perfection. Over time, small complaints began to surface. Subtle at first. Then more frequent. Maintenance notices. Suggestions. Warnings disguised as recommendations. They wanted control. And they didn't have it. The tension had always been there, quietly building beneath polite emails and official-looking documents. Every notice felt less like a rule enforcement and more like a test, how far they could push, how much authority they could claim. But there were limits. Legal limits. Or at least, there were supposed to be. That belief started to crumble the moment the paperwork was pulled. The official records didn't match reality. Ownership was still intact. The name on the title hadn't changed. There had been no transfer, no sale, no authorization. And yet, construction continued. That meant one thing. Someone had bypassed the system. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. It was operating beyond them. And if they were willing to cross that line, it meant this wasn't about landscaping complaints or neighborhood standards. This was something bigger. Something calculated. At first, the reaction was disbelief. There was a natural assumption that this had to be a misunderstanding. A clerical error. A mix-up buried somewhere in layers of paperwork and approvals. Something that could be corrected with a few calls and the right documents. But that hope didn't last. Every step forward only confirmed the same truth. The construction company had permits. The permits had signatures. The signatures had authority. And that authority traced back to the HOA. That was the moment the emotional shift happened. This wasn't confusion. This was betrayal. The same organization that sent warnings over minor details had somehow justified selling or repurposing land they didn't own. The same people who claimed to protect property values had quietly erased ownership when it became inconvenient. The anger didn't come from the land itself. It came from the assumption behind it. They believed no one would question them. They believed power was enough to replace legality. And they believed the system would protect them. But systems have cracks. And the deeper the investigation went, the more those cracks began to show. Records didn't align. Timelines didn't match. Certain approvals appeared too quickly, too cleanly, as if they had been rushed or forced through without proper oversight. Patterns started to emerge. And patterns reveal intent. By the time the next HOA meeting approached, the situation had already escalated beyond private concern. This wasn't just about one lot anymore. It was about precedent. If one property could be taken, reassigned, and developed without consent, then every property in the neighborhood was vulnerable. That realization spread quickly once the facts began to surface. Attention shifted. Neighbors who once ignored HOA decisions began to question them. Documents were reviewed. Past actions were re-examined. Small inconsistencies turned into larger concerns. The meeting became a focal point. Not for resolution, but for exposure. The presence alone changed the atmosphere. What had once been routine gatherings now carried tension. Eyes that once avoided confrontation now searched for answers. The authority the board relied on started to feel less solid, less certain. And the pressure built. Because the truth was no longer isolated. It was visible. The construction site stood as physical evidence. The documents existed. The timeline was undeniable. And the more it was discussed, the harder it became to dismiss. The challenge wasn't just legal. It was public. And public pressure does something legal threats alone cannot. It forces accountability. The breakthrough didn't come from a single document. It came from a connection. Hidden within layers of approvals and signatures was a link between board members and the development project itself. Names that appeared on HOA decisions also appeared in business filings. Companies tied to the construction had quiet connections to those responsible for approving it. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. The land hadn't been taken for community use. It had been positioned for profit. That revelation changed everything. What once looked like overreach now pointed to corruption. The authority used to justify the construction wasn't just misapplied, it had been manipulated for personal gain. And once that connection became clear, the entire structure began to collapse. Because corruption doesn't exist in isolation. It leaves trails. And those trails lead to consequences. The outcome didn't happen overnight. But it happened. Construction stopped. Permits were revoked. Legal challenges forced the project into a complete halt. The land, once overtaken by machinery and fencing, returned to its original state, scarred, but reclaimed. The HOA faced more than just internal conflict. Investigations followed. Positions changed. And the authority that once seemed untouchable was reduced to something far more fragile. Accountability replaced assumption. The lot remained empty after that. Not as a missed opportunity, but as a reminder. Because the value of the land had never just been financial. It was proof of something larger, that ownership matters, that systems can be challenged, and that authority without accountability eventually fails. The quiet piece of land became something else entirely. A line that had been crossed. And then redrawn.